In this video, I'm going to be doing a deep dive on DIMO, which is one of my favorite projects in the DePIN space and one that's really been flying under the radar, but I don't think that's going to be the case for much longer. Now, full disclosure, while I'm not an employee of DIMO, I am building out my own personal fleet. I have 140 vehicles connected so far, but I have no plans of slowing down. Now, we're still super early in this, and I think there's a massive opportunity here, and I'm going to be breaking down all the details that you need to know about this project. But before we get started, I have to say, nothing in this video is financial advice and is for your entertainment purposes only. You should always do your own research. So what is DIMO and what is this project looking to achieve? Well, first you need to understand what telematics data is. It's a combination of your GPS and driving patterns and the diagnostic data on your vehicle. And this data is incredibly valuable. This year alone, it's expected to drive over $85 billion in revenue. And by 2030, that's expected to grow to over $280 billion. But up until this point, vehicle manufacturers and insurance companies have had a monopoly over all of your data and all the revenue that comes with it. But DIMO is changing that. Now, through a crowdsourced effort, they're creating the largest database of telematics data that exists. And it's vehicle manufacturer agnostic. In other words, it's comprised of all makes and models of vehicles, and they're making it open source for developers to come in and build applications that leverage this data and all of the value that comes with it. And that value is then distributed amongst network participants. In other words, people like you and me can connect our vehicles to the network, take ownership of our data for the first time ever, and be compensated for it. Now, I'm going to give you some real world examples of ways that DIMO is already generating revenue today. But first, here's a summary of what I'm going to be covering in this video. Now, there are four main categories that I use to evaluate projects in the DePIN space. Number one is utility, because that's what determines how much revenue can come into the project. Number two is participation, because obviously you need people to participate in the network in order to drive that revenue. Number three is the team, because ultimately you need a team on the back end that can execute. Otherwise, the project has no chance of succeeding. And lastly is the tokenomics, because that is what determines how value is distributed amongst participants in the network. Now, starting with utility, this is one of my favorite things about this project because there are so many different potential revenue streams. But first, I want to focus on the utility just within the DIMO app itself as a vehicle owner. Now, in the app itself, you can see things like your fuel levels, your engine load, your battery health, and the location of your vehicle. In fact, one of the drivers in my fleet actually had their vehicle stolen, and we were able to locate it because of the DIMO device that was connected to the vehicle. Now, you can actually run vehicle diagnostic checks on your vehicle through the app as well. So let's say you have a check engine light. We can run this test, and the DIMO app will diagnose any error codes that come through using AI on the back end and tell you what's wrong with your vehicle. Now, if you were to go to the dealership, a diagnostic test can actually run you as much as $150. Now, looking forward into 2024, there's going to be more capabilities added like remote start and unlocking, locking your vehicle from your phone. And DIMO has a marketplace where you can get discounted services for your vehicle. Now, as more and more vehicles get added to the network, the marketplace will only become more robust with more offerings for you to take advantage of. With that said, let's talk about the revenue streams that DIMO is moving into, starting with fleet management. Fleet management is a huge industry already at over $23 billion, but is expected to grow to over $79 billion by 2030. Now, DIMO will absolutely be able to integrate into fleet management platforms that exist today, but it is open source for developers to build new fleet management applications, and Vehicle Genius is a perfect example of that. Now, Vehicle Genius is essentially combining both fleet management and roadside assistance. Let's say that you own a rental fleet of vehicles. Through their platform, you'll have complete insight into your entire fleet. But Vehicle Genius will also time and schedule maintenance for you. And from the consumer standpoint, there's some pretty cool features.
We scan the QR code, boom, click the link, and it's the experience, right? They're seeing, need help, they see a map, they see some FAQs about their specific Model 3. There's a roadside assistance tool here, where you click and you can get roadside assistance through our integration with a company named Honk. And then there's a need help, text us. So if you click that, it pre-populates a text message. You click send, and this is actually a ChatGPT integration trained on the make and model specific information. So it knows that you're driving a Model 3. That'll answer based on having a Model 3. And now we're going to ask, how do I turn on the headlights? So as you can see, it's going through ChatGPT right now. It gives you step-by-step ways to in detail that a renter can easily understand, even if it's a complicated car like a Tesla.
Vehicle Genius is already being utilized by some pretty sizable fleets across the country, and this is just one example of ways that DIMO is already bringing in revenue. The next category is usage-based insurance. This is already a $57 billion industry, but is expected to grow to over $174 billion by 2030. Now, in the past, you basically got a very cookie-cutter plan based on a few different parameters like your gender, your age, where you're located, etc. But over the past past few years, things have started to transition to usage-based plans, which is more customized to your driving. Now, you've probably had your insurance company reach out to you and offer you a safe driver discount by plugging their device into your vehicle. But here's the problem with that. Your insurance company knows that you have to get a plan from them, so they have all the leverage in the situation. And they're taking your data and monetizing in other ways. Well, DIMO just recently integrated with Marble, and this is going to allow you to take ownership of your data and actually shop it around to different insurance companies. So you're going to take back the power in the situation, and they'll have to earn your business, which is going to allow you to find the best customized plan for you. I think this is an absolutely massive opportunity for DIMO. The next category is decentralized rideshare applications. Now, this is already over a $42 billion industry in 2023, but is expected to grow to over $205 billion by 2030. I don't think it's a secret to anyone that Uber and Lyft have had a monopoly over this space, but their rates have risen by over 80% since 2018. But here's the kicker. The drivers are actually making less money. It's because these large entities have become very top heavy and they have to continue raising prices to offset those additional costs. Now, I would say there's absolutely room for competition, and decentralized rideshare applications that are built inside the DIMO ecosystem will allow for better pricing for consumers and better pay for drivers by eliminating the high cost of these large centralized entities. I actually have an article linked below where I did an interview with the DIMO team on this use case specifically, and I highly recommend you check that out. Now, lastly, I want to talk about what I would consider edge cases or new revenue streams that haven't existed before. And Coverage Critic is a perfect example of that. Have you ever been in an area where your cell phone service cuts out and it's just a complete dead zone? I had this happen to me when I moved to my last home. It would have been nice to know before I signed a full-year contract with my cell provider. Now, there is a map that exists through the FCC, but the data points that they use are self-reported from these different cell providers, and they only update it like every 6 months. So not only is the data inaccurate, but it's also very outdated. Well, Coverage Critic is building a real-time map that shows the actual signal strength of all the different telecoms, and they're doing it by integrating with DIMO. The original hardware device used to connect to the DIMO network has cell connectivity built in, and they're integrated with Twilio. So the way it works is if you're driving around, you lose connection with one of the cell providers, it'll hop over to another one that has the best connection. And Coverage Critic is collecting millions of data points to build out this map so that you can get actual data in real time. And they'll be able to see which telecoms are actually accurately reporting where they have coverage. The best part is that the revenue that's coming into the DIMO ecosystem from this data is being distributed amongst participants today. And I'm going to show you physically where you can see that later in this video. Now, in summary, DIMO absolutely knocks it out of the park when it comes to utility. But what about participation? When I'm evaluating this category, I start off by asking 2 questions. Number 1, how technologically savvy do you need to be to participate? Number 2, how well versed in crypto do you need to be? And the answer for both of these with DIMO is, well, you don't. The onboarding process with DIMO is incredibly easy, and you can set up a crypto wallet within the app without even knowing that you're actually setting up a crypto wallet. So I really have to give credit to the team for making this process so easy. And that is absolutely huge because only 5% of people globally have crypto assets today. And if you can bring non-crypto people into your project, you've already increased your target audience by 20x. Now, the second thing I look at is cost of entry. Well, if you're a Tesla owner or you have other newer vehicles that have connectivity built in already, there's a good chance that you can actually connect through the DIMO app for free without having to buy any hardware at all. But for the rest of us, there's a couple different options you can choose from. You have the original AutoPi unit, which comes in at $299. It has all the bells and whistles and cell connectivity built in. This is what I personally use to build out my entire fleet. But they did just launch a new lower cost unit at $99, and that's the Macaron. Now, this device has 3 years of connectivity to the Helium network built into the price point already, which is pretty cool. And it just started shipping this week. But this is a huge move from this team because bringing that cost down is going to help to exponentially grow this network. Now let's talk numbers and where I think this thing is going. There's currently an estimated 1.47 billion vehicles on the road today. But when you account for the countries that DIMO is launched in and the fact that your car needs to be a 2008 or newer, I estimate that there are roughly 650 million vehicles that are eligible to connect to the DIMO network today. In other words, for DIMO to get to 1 million vehicles connected, you'd only need 1 out of every 650 vehicles that are eligible to connect to the network, which is absolutely doable. And it wouldn't be unprecedented. We saw this with Helium in the last bull run. They went from roughly 15,000 hotspots deployed to nearly 1 million over an 18-month period. And the cost of entry for Helium was higher. And coming from someone that has over 70 Helium rooftop installs across the country, you definitely need to be a little bit technologically savvy to participate in that project. And as a hotspot host, you don't really have any personal utility like you have within the DIMO app. So all that said, Not only do I see this network hitting 1 million vehicles, I see it getting into the multiple millions of vehicles. But to put into perspective how early we are, let's just say we get to 1 million vehicles. There are 27,000 vehicles connected today. That would put you in the first 2.7 percentile, which is exactly where you want to be when it comes to these types of projects. All right, there's one other side of participation that I want to touch on, and that is on the developer side. In fact, I think the opportunity here may be even larger than the opportunity for vehicle owners. Now think about this. As a developer, you're about to have this vast network of telematics data at your disposal, so you can start building out applications that leverage that data and all the revenue associated with it. And you can start building now ahead of everyone else. So once vehicles start connecting in droves, you'll be able to hit the ground running, and you'll have a head start on all the other developers that are going to be flocking into this ecosystem. Oh, and there's a grant program. So if you have a really good idea for an application, you can actually apply for a grant and get funding to help bootstrap your efforts on the front end. All in all, whether you're a vehicle owner or a developer, I think there's a massive opportunity here from a participation standpoint. That said, there is something I would like to see improvement on, and that is from a fleet manager perspective. I can tell you with 140 vehicles in my fleet, I'd like to see more tools to have better insight into my fleet, but also an automated payment system, because I'm having to manually calculate and send payments every week, which has become a little bit tedious. That said, I know I'm an outlier case, and I'm glad the team is focusing their efforts on the things that are most important right now for the masses, but it is still something I would like to see. All right, let's talk about the team. Now, the first thing I look at is the leadership and their backgrounds. And I have to say, I don't know that they could have constructed a much better team for this project. Now, starting with Andy, he spent over 10 years in the mobility space prior to joining DIMO, so I would say the moving things around is warranted. But he also managed a massive team of people that were working on Waymo, which is Google's self-driving car division. Now, moving over to Alex, he spent 10 years working around startups, specifically in the crypto space and IoT world. And he's super active on the front lines of DIMO. I feel like he's doing interviews literally every day. Next, you have Rob, who has an extensive background in finance, specifically in the crypto space. And prior to that, he worked at Vroom, which is a huge player in the used car marketplace sector. Now, Rob is really the brains behind the tokenomics of this project. And I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed with his execution. And I highly recommend you read through the full documentation on the DIMO website. And lastly, we have Yev, who apparently didn't get the memo about attending Cornell University. I'm kidding. The first three guys all went to Cornell, but Michigan State will suffice, I suppose. But in all seriousness, this guy has multiple patents in the IoT space. And he worked on a mobility platform that was used by both Volkswagen and Mitsubishi. So an incredibly impressive resume, and one that absolutely aligns with this project. In summary, this is basically the dream team for this type of project. Now, looking past the leadership team, I'm seeing exactly what I like to see from the developers. They continue to push out improvements in the app. The onboarding process is easier than it's ever been, and they're continuing to build out integrations with all these new partnerships that have been announced through the DIMO ecosystem. Now, a couple other things that I like to look at. The team is super active on their social media platforms, which is always a good sign. And you can see here, they are hiring for a couple positions to expand their team, which is also another really good sign. And the last thing I look at as far as the team goes is how they interact with the community, particularly on platforms like Discord. And I actually have a personal example of this. So a few months ago, I had plans to go set up a pretty large fleet with a business owner. And my goal was to connect 20 vehicles that day. And of course, on the second vehicle, I ran into a snag in the app and I got completely stuck. And I hopped into Discord. I was able to get connected to one of their developers, and they were able to go in on the back end, work their magic, and get me unstuck within like 10 minutes. And I was able to set my personal record, which I still have not beaten, but I did get 20 vehicles onboarded that day, and there's no way I would have been able to do it if they had not been so quick and responsive. So overall, I've been pretty blown away with the team's execution so far. All right, let's talk about the tokenomics. So in this section, I'm going to talk about the supply, how it's distributed, and how you earn as a contributor. But first, let's talk about the distribution. The max supply of DIMO tokens that will ever exist is 1 billion tokens, but that gets minted and distributed over time. Now, this is available on their website in the documentation section. And you'll see that 8% goes to capital partners or their investors, and 22% goes to the teams for a total of 30%. This is actually a lot lower than other projects in the DePIN space, which is frankly a good thing for participants. Now, the only thing I'm going to nitpick here is the unlock schedule starting after only 2 years, and they're pretty much fully vested after 3 years. And it's actually pretty common for projects in the DePIN space, but I would personally like to see a slightly longer unlock period. And for the allocation to the team, they actually could potentially push that vesting period out a little bit, and I think that move probably would be well received by the community. But all in all, I think it is a moot point because based on my conversations and interactions with the team, I have absolutely no question about their long-term commitment to this project. The next section I want to call your attention to is the DIMO Treasury, which is a 25% allocation. And the way these tokens are utilized comes down to community votes. So people participating in the project have a say in how these tokens are utilized. And an example of this is that grant program that I talked about earlier. And obviously that benefits everybody involved because the more developers you can bring into the space and the more revenue that comes into the project, well, everyone wins in that scenario. Now, the remaining 45% gets distributed to network participants like you and me. There was a 7% airdrop that hit very early on. Unfortunately, I did miss out on that. That was distributed at the mainnet launch to people that had been participating super early on. And that leaves 38% or roughly 380 million tokens for what's called baseline issuance. Now, I'm going to break down how baseline issuance works because I think it's really important to understand if you're going to get involved in this project. And I'll use my field of dreams analogy. If you build it, they will come. Probably aging myself a little bit with this reference, but the thought process is if you build it, and when I say if you build it, I mean building the database of telematics data. So you need people to connect their vehicles. And as that network grows, they will come, meaning developers will come into the space to build applications. And it's those applications that's going to unlock all of this revenue. And essentially that's what baseline issuance is for. It's upfront incentives to attract people to connect their vehicles on the front end. And here's how the distribution works. So baseline issuance is on a set schedule that we distributed over a 40-year period. And at the very beginning, and currently, there's 1,105,000 DIMO distributed each week on Monday morning. Anyone that has their vehicle connected to the network gets a portion of this weekly distribution. Whether you're connected with the $299 AutoPi, the $99 Macaron, or you've just connected your Tesla, for example. But the level of distribution for each one of these connection types does differ. And I'm going to show you the breakdown of these numbers in a moment. But there's two other things I want to call out. Number one, the issuance does decrease every year by 15%. And that's actually coming up on December 12th, which is the 1-year anniversary of the mainnet launch. And I think this was a really good move by the team because other projects like Helium, for example, institute what's called a halving. Essentially, every 2 years, Helium cuts the rewards in half. And they actually caught a lot of scrutiny for this because people thought that they were incentivizing the early participants too much. And that's why I think this 15% decrease was a really smart move by the DIMO team because it does a really good job of still rewarding the early participants, but not so much that it's unfair for people that join later. The other thing I want to call out is that the longer your vehicle is connected to the network, well, the more value you're bringing to the network and you are rewarded for that. So you'll see here, you hit these different levels as you have consecutive weeks connected to the network. And your baseline issuance increases as you move up to these different levels. At week 4 of being connected, you move to level 2. Once you hit week 21, you hit level 3 and 36, level 4. Now, in order to qualify for these baseline rewards, you just have to drive your vehicle at least once per week. Now, let's say you're out of town for a week or two and you're unable to drive your car. You won't get baseline issuance for that week, but you don't lose your streak. You have to miss 3 consecutive weeks to lose your streak, and that will relegate you backwards 1 level. All right, now I'm going to show you a breakdown of the actual numbers, and I think this will all make a lot more sense. And I'll say, if you're looking at getting into this project, I highly recommend you follow this guy. He releases a breakdown every Monday of the DIMO rewards. He also covers a lot of other projects in the DeepIn space and is very well informed. All right, you'll see this is broken down between the $299 AutoPi, the new $99 Macaron, as well as the Tesla rewards. Now you see Macaron users just had their first distribution last week. And one thing I want to call out here is that while it is a third of the price, it is also a third of the earnings. So something to keep in mind when you're making your purchasing decision. Now to further dial into this, I want to focus on the AutoPi specifically. Now you'll see the different levels. Now again, you move up levels by having your vehicle connected for more consecutive weeks. And you'll see as you move up levels, the earnings do increase. But you'll also see that week over week, the earnings decrease. And that's because the number of vehicles connected is growing. And there's still 1.1 million DIMO tokens being distributed each week, but it's being split up amongst more vehicles. But there is something else I want to call your attention to. And that's looking at the distribution on September 25th and the following distribution on October 2nd. You'll see the number of vehicles did indeed increase week over week, but the DIMO earnings also increased. Now the baseline issuance absolutely did move down, but that's the same week that Coverage Critic started buying data points. And the revenue that came in from Coverage Critic was then distributed amongst network participants. And you'll see this happen in several other weeks. From October 16th to October 23rd, you had another jump there. And then again from November 20th to November 27th. And that is where the project is going. The baseline issuance will continue decreasing, but as revenue comes into the project, those rewards will start to take over. And eventually, the baseline issuance will become a very small percentage of what you're earning every week. That's ultimately how this project will become self-sufficient based on the revenue that's coming into the ecosystem. That said, I think we have a golden opportunity right now, since we're so early in this, to capitalize on these baseline issuance rewards. And that's why I'm trying to connect as many vehicles as I can, because I think people are going to look back at this time period in a year or two from now and wish they had gotten in sooner. But in summary, the utility behind this project is bar none. Participation is super easy, which should lead to exponential growth in the network. The DIMO team is incredibly capable, so I have no doubt that they're going to continue executing on the back end. And the tokenomics are incredibly well thought out, and I think do a really good job of distributing value amongst participants in the network. So hopefully you found this video helpful. So please give this video a like, comment below, shoot me a follow. I will be putting out a lot more videos like this, and I have to say I do appreciate your viewership. I'm signing off. This is Bradley Meyer with the DePIN Connection.